This is Cast of Wonders, the young adult fiction podcast featuring stories of the fantastic. Welcome. Episode 323 for September 25th, 2018. This is Marguerite Kenner, your editor and host. September 23rd through 29th of 2018 is Banned Books Week, an annual international event celebrating the freedom to read and committed to raising awareness of the immense social value of free and open access to information. Cast of Wonders' 2018 theme for Banned Books Week is libraries, bastions of learning. A good library can give you answers to the questions you never knew you had. A good librarian can open doors to worlds you never knew existed. This week, we're sharing some of those worlds and words with you. Our second story for Banned Books Week is A Witch's Guide to Escape, a practical compendium of portal fantasies by Alex E. Harrow. This story was previously published in issue 105 of Apex magazine. Extra special thanks to Rachel K. Jones for recommending it and for offering to host this episode before the combination of a new school year and a head cold made it impossible. Thanks, Rachel. We hope you feel better soon. Alex E. Harrow is a part-time historian with a full-time desk job, a debilitating rereading habit, and authorial ambitions. She and her husband live in Kentucky under the cheerful tyranny of their kids, cats, and a very patient border collie. Find her at Alex E. Harrow on Twitter. Links, as always, in the show notes. The story is narrated by Lisa Hicks. After training at the Drama Studio London, Lisa went on to perform in children's theatre in the USA, then became a librarian at an international school in Belgium, where she also teaches theatre studies. She has a passion for juvenile and YA fiction. With years of experience reading books to her students on a daily basis, audiobook narration has been a natural next step for her. Her website will be linked in the show notes. And now, we've a tale to tell.
A Witch's Guide to Escape, a practical compendium of portal fantasies, by Alex E. Harrow, narrated by Lisa Hicks. You'd think it would make us happy when a kid checks out the same book a zillion times in a row, but actually, it just keeps us up at night. The Runaway Prince is one of those low-budget young adult fantasies from the mid-90s, before J.K. Rowling arrived to tell everyone that magic was cool, printed on brittle yellow paper. It's about a lonely boy who runs away and discovers a magical portal into another world where he has medieval adventures. But honestly, there are so many typos, most people give it up before he even finds the portal. Not this kid, though. He pulled it off the shelf and sat cross-legged in the juvenile fiction section with his grimy red backpack clutched to his chest. He didn't move for hours. Other patrons were forced to double back in the aisle, shooting suspicious, "You don't belong here" looks behind them, as if wondering what a skinny black teenager was really up to while pretending to read a fantasy book. He ignored them. The books above him rustled and quivered. That kind of attention flatters them. He took the Runaway Prince home and renewed it twice online, at which point a gray pop-up box that looks like an emissary from 1995 tells you, "The renewal limit for this item has been reached." You can almost feel the disapproving eyes of a librarian glaring at you through the screen. There have only ever been two kinds of librarians in the history of the world. The prudish, bitter ones with lipstick running into the cracks around their lips who believe the books are their personal property and patrons are dangerous delinquents come to steal them. And then there are witches. Our late fee is 25 cents per day or a can of non-perishable food during the summer food drive. By the time the boy finally slid the runaway prince into the return slot, he owed $4.75. I didn't have to swipe his card to know. Any good librarian, of the second kind, ought to be able to tell you the exact dollar amount of a patron's bill just by the angle of their shoulders. What did you think? I used my "this is a secret between us pals" voice, which works on teenagers about 16% of the time. He shrugged. It has a lower success rate with black teenagers because this is the rural South, and they aren't stupid enough to trust 30-something white ladies no matter how many tattoos we have. Didn't finish it, huh? I knew he'd finished it, at least 4 times, by the warm, well-oiled feel of the pages. Yeah, I did. His eyes flicked up. They were smoke-colored and long-lashed, with an achy, faraway expression, as if he knew there was something gleaming and forbidden just beneath the dull surfaces of things he could never quite touch. They were the kinds of eyes that had belonged to sorcerers or soothsayers in different times. The ending sucked. In the end, the runaway prince leaves medieval Adventureland and closes the portal behind him before returning home to his family. It was supposed to be a happy ending, which kind of tells you all you need to know about this kid's life, doesn't it? He left without checking anything else out. Garrison, Alan B. The Tavalarian Chronicles, F.G.A.R., 1976. Le Guin, Ursula K. A Wizard of Earthsea, J. Fick, L.E.G., 1968. He returned 4 days later, sloping past a bright blue display titled, "This Summer, Dive into Reading." Who knows where they were supposed to swim? Ulysses County's lone public pool had been filled with cement in the 60s rather than desegregate. Because I am a librarian of the second sort, I almost always know what kind of book a person wants. It's like a very particular smell rising off them, which is instantly recognizable as murder mystery or political biography or something kind of trashy but ultimately life-affirming, preferably with lesbians. I do my best to give people the books they need most. In grad school, they called it ensuring readers have access to texts/materials that are engaging and emotionally rewarding. And in my other kind of schooling, they called it divining the unfilled spaces in their souls and filling them with stories and starshine. But it comes to the same thing. I don't bother with people who have call numbers scribbled on their palms and titles rattling around in their skulls like bingo cards. They don't need me. And you really can't do anything for the people who only read award-winning literature, who wear elbow patches and equate the popularity of Twilight with the death of the American intellect. Their hearts are too closed up for the new or secret or undiscovered. So, it's only a certain kind of patron I pay attention to, the kind that let their eyes feather across the titles like trailing fingertips, heads cocked, with book hunger rising off them like heat waves from July pavement. The books bask in it, of course, even the really hopeless cases that haven't been checked out since 1958. There aren't many of these. Me and Agnes take turns carting home outdated astronomy textbooks that still think Pluto is a planet, and cookbooks that call for lard, just to keep their spirits up. I choose 1 or 2 books and let their spines gleam and glimmer in the twilit stacks. People reach toward them without quite knowing why. The boy with the red backpack wasn't an experienced aisle wanderer. He prowled, moving too quickly to read the titles, hands hanging empty and uncertain at his sides. The sewing and pattern books, 646.2, noted that his jeans were unlaundered and too small, and the neck of his t-shirt was stained grayish-yellow. The cookbooks, 641.5, diagnosed a diet of frozen waffles and a gas station pizza. They tisked to themselves. I sat at the circulation desk, running returns beneath the blinky red scanner light, and breathed him in. I was expecting something like generic Arthurian retelling or maybe teen romance with sword fighting, but instead I found a howling, clamoring mess of need. He smelled of 1,000 secret worlds, of rabbit holes and hidden doorways and platforms 9 3/4, of Wonderland and Oz and Narnia, of any place but here. He smelled of yearning. Oh, God, save me from the yearners, the insatiable, the inconsolable, the ones who chafe and claw against the edges of the world. No book can save them. That's a lie. There are books potent enough to save any mortal soul, books of witchery, augury, alchemy, books with wand wood in their spines and moon dust on their pages, books older than stones and wily as dragons. We give people the books they need most, except when we don't. I sent him a 70s sword and sorcery series because it was total junk food, and he needed fattening up, and because I hoped 16 volumes might act as a sort of ballast and keep his keening soul from rising away into the ether. I let Le Guin shimmer at him, too, because he reminded me a bit of Ged, feral, full of longing. I ignored the lion, the witch, and the wardrobe jostling importantly on its shelf. This was a kid who wanted to go through the wardrobe and never, ever come back. Grayson, Dr. Bernard. When Nothing Matters Anymore. A Survival Guide for Depressed Teens. 616.84, GRA, 2002. Once you make it past Book 4 of the Tavalarian Chronicles, you're committed at least through Book 14, when the true sword of Tavalar is revealed, and the young farm boy ascends to his rightful throne. The boy with the red backpack showed up every week or so all summer for the next installment. I snuck in a few others, all pretty old, all pretty white. Our branch director is one of those pinch-lipped Baptists who thinks fantasy books teach kids about devil worship. So, roughly 90% of my collection requests are mysteriously denied. A Wrinkle in Time came back with the furtive, jammed-in-a-backpack scent that meant he liked it, but thought it was too young for him. Watership Down was offended because he never got past the first 10 pages. But I guess footnotes about rabbit math aren't for everyone. And The Golden Compass had the flashlight smell of 3:00 a.m. on its final chapter and was unbearably smug about it. I'd just gotten an interlibrary loaned copy of Akata Witch when he stopped coming. Our display, Get Ready, as in READ-Y, for school, was filled with SAT prep kits and oversized yellow for dummies books. Agnes had cut out blobby construction paper leaves and taped them to the front doors. Lots of kids stop hanging around the library when school starts up, with all its clubs and teams. I worried anyway. I could feel the book I hadn't given him like a wrong note or a missing tooth, a magnetic absence. Just when I was seriously considering calling Ulysses County High School with a made-up story about an unreturned CD, he came back. For the first time, there was someone else with him. A squat white woman with a plastic name tag and the kind of squarish perm you can only get in southern beauty salons with faded glamour shots in the windows. The boy trailed behind her, looking thin and pressed, like a flower crushed between dictionary pages. I wondered how badly you had to fuck up to get assigned a school counselor after hours until I read her name tag. Department of Community-Based Services, Division of Protection and Permanency, Child Caseworker. Oh, a foster kid. The woman marched him through the nonfiction stacks. The travel guides sighed as she passed, muttering about overwork and recommending vacations to sunny, faraway beaches. She stopped in the 616s. Here, why don't we have a look at these? Predictable, sullen silence from the boy. A person who works with foster kids 60 hours a week is unfazed by sullenness. She slid titles off the shelf and stacked them in the boy's arms. We talked about this, remember? We decided you might like to read something practical, something helpful. Dealing with Depression, 616.81, WHI, 1998. Beating the Blues, 5 Steps to Feeling Normal Again, 616.822, TRE, 2011. Chicken Soup for the Depressed Soul, 616.9, CAN. The books greeted him in soothing, syrupy voices. The boy stayed silent. Look, I know you'd rather read about dragons and, elves. Oh, Tolkien, you have so much to account for. But sometimes we gotta face our problems head on rather than running away from them. What bullshit! I was in the back room running scratched DVDs through the disc repair machine, so the only person to hear me swear was Agnes. She gave me her patented over-the-glasses shame on you look, which, when properly deployed, can reduce noisy patrons to piles of ash or pillars of salt. Agnes is a librarian of the second kind, too. But seriously, anyone could see that the kid needed to run and keep running until he shed his own skin, until he clawed out of the choking darkness and unfurled his wings, precious and prisming in the light of some other world. His caseworker was one of those people who say the word escapism as if it's a moral failing, a regrettable hobby, a mental health diagnosis, as if escape is not, in itself, one of the highest order of magics they'll ever see in their miserable mortal lives, right up there with true love and prophetic dreams and fireflies blinking in synchrony on a June evening. The boy and his keeper were winding back through the aisles toward the front desk. The boy's shoulders were curled inward, as if he chafed against invisible walls on either side. As he passed the juvenile fiction section, a cheap paperback flung itself off the return cart and thudded into his kneecap. He picked it up and rubbed his thumb softly over the title. The Runaway Prince purred at him. He smiled. I thanked the library cart silently. There was a long, familiar sigh behind me. I turned to see Agnes watching me from the circulation desk, aquamarine nails tapping the cover of a Grisham novel, eyes crimped with pity. "Oh, honey, not another one," they said. I turned back to my stack of DVDs, unsmiling, thinking things like, "What do you know about it?" and "This one is different," and "Oh, shit." Dumas, Alexandre, The Count of Monte Cristo, F. DUM, 1974. The boy returned at 10:30 on a Tuesday morning. It's official library policy to report truants to the high school because the school board felt we were becoming a haven for unsupervised and illicit teenage activity. I happen to think that's exactly what libraries should aspire to be, and suggested we get it engraved on a plaque for the front door. But then I was asked to be serious or leave the proceedings. And anyway, we're supposed to report kids who skip school to play League of Legends on our computers or skulk in the graphic novel section. I watched the boy prowling the shelves, muscles strung wire-tight over his bones, his soul writhing and clawing like a caged creature, and did not reach for the phone. Agnes, still wearing her "oh, honey" expression, declined to reprimand me. I sent him home with the Count of Monte Cristo, partly because it requires your full attention and a flowchart to keep track of the plot, and the kid needed distracting, but mostly because of what Edmund says on the second-to-last page. All human wisdom is summed up in these two words: wait and hope. But people can't keep waiting and hoping forever. They fracture, they unravel, they crack open, they do something desperate and stupid, and then you see their high school senior photo printed in the Ulysses Gazette, grainy and oversized, and you spend the next 5 years thinking, "Oh, if only I'd given her the right book." Rowling, J.K., Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, J. Fick, R.O.W., 1998. Rowling, J.K., Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, J. Fick, R.O.W., 1999. Rowling, J.K., Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, J. Fick, R.O.W., 1999. Every librarian has books she never lends to anyone. I'm not talking about first editions of Alice in Wonderland or Dutch translations of Winnie the Pooh. I'm talking about books so powerful and potent, so full of susurrating seduction that only librarians of the second sort even know they exist. Each of us has her own system for keeping them hidden. The most venerable libraries, the ones with oak paneling and vaulted ceilings and Beauty and the Beast-style ladders, have secret rooms behind fireplaces or bookcases which you can only enter by tugging on a certain title on the shelf. Sainte Geneviève in Paris is supposed to have vast catacombs beneath it, guarded by librarians so ancient and desiccated they've become human-shaped books, paper-skinned and ink-blooded. In Timbuktu, I heard they hired wizard-smiths to make great wrought-iron gates that only permit passage to the pure of heart. In the Maysville branch of the Ulysses County Library System, we have a locked roll-top desk in the Special Collections Room with a sign on it that says, "This is antique. Please ask for assistance." We only have a dozen or so books anyhow, and God knows where they came from or how they ended up here. A Witch's Guide to Seeking Righteous Vengeance, with its slender steel pages and arsenic ink. A Witch's Guide to Falling in Love for the First Time, for readers at every stage of life, which smells like starlight and the summer you were 17. A Witch's Guide to Uncanny Baking contains over 30 full-color photographs to ensorcell your friends and afflict your adversaries. A Witch's Guide to Escape, a practical compendium of portal fantasies, has no words in it at all, but only pages and pages of maps, hand-drawn Middle-earth knockoffs with unpronounceable names, medieval tapestry maps showing tiny ships sailing off the edge of the world, topographical maps of Machu Picchu, 1970s Rand McNally street maps of Istanbul. It's my job to keep books like this out of the hands of desperate high school kids with red backpacks. Our schoolmistress called it preserving the hallowed and hidden arts of our foremothers from mundane eyes. Our professors called it conserving rare/historic texts. Both of them mean the same thing. We give people the books they need, except when we don't. Except when they need them the most. He racked up $1.50 on the Count of Monte Cristo and returned it with salt water splotches on the final pages. They weren't "my favorite character died" tears, or "the book is over" tears. They were bitter, acidic, anise-scented tears of jealousy. He was jealous that the Count and Haydée sailed away from their world and out into the blue unknown, that they escaped. I panicked and weighed him down with the first 3 Harry Potters because they don't really get good until Sirius and Lupin show up, and because they're about a neglected, lonely kid who gets a letter from another world and disappears. George, J.C., The Runaway Prince, J. Fick, G.E.O., 1994. Agnes always does the "we will be closing in 10 minutes" announcement, because something in her voice implies that anybody still in the library in 9 minutes and 50 seconds will be harvested for organ donations, and even the most stationary patrons amble towards the exit. The kid with the red backpack was hovering in the oversized print section. Gossipy aging books, bored since the advent of e-readers with changeable font sizes. When Agnes's voice came through the speakers, he went very still, teetering the way a person does when they're about to do something really dumb. Then he dove beneath the reading desk and pulled his dark hoodie over his head. The oversized books gave scintillated squeals. It was my turn to close, so Agnes left right at 9. By 9:15, I was standing at the door, with my NPR tote on my shoulder and my keys in my hand, hesitating. It is very, extremely, absolutely against the rules to lock up for the night with a patron still inside, especially when that patron is a minor of questionable emotional health. It's big trouble in both the conventional sense, phone calls from panicked guardians, police searches, charges of criminal neglect, and in the other sense, libraries at night are noisier places than they are during the daylight hours. I'm not a natural rule follower. I roll through stop signs, I swear in public, I lie on online personality tests so I get the answers I want. Hermione, Arya Stark, Jo March. But I'm a very good librarian of either kind, and good librarians follow the rules, even when they don't want to. That's what Agnes told me 5 years ago when I first started at Maysville. This girl had started showing up on Sunday afternoons, ponytailed, cute, but wearing one of those knee-length denim skirts that scream, "Mandatory virginity pledge." I'd been feeding her a steady diet of subversion. Orwell, Bradbury, Butler, and I was about to hit her with A Handmaid's Tale when she suddenly lost interest in fiction. She drifted through the stacks, face gone white and empty as a blank page, navy skirt swishing against her knees. It wasn't until she reached the 618s that I understood. The maternity and childbirth section trilled saccharine congratulations. She touched one finger to the spine of What to Expect When You're Expecting, 618.2 EIS, with an expression of dawning, swallowing horror, and left without checking anything out. For the next 9 weeks, I sent her stories of bravery and boldness, defying your parents' stories and empowered women resisting authority stories. I abandoned subtlety entirely and slid Planned Parenthood pamphlets into her book bag, even though the nearest clinic is 6 hours away and only open twice a week, but found them jammed frantically in the bathroom trash. But I never gave her what she really needed. A witch's guide to undoing what has been done. A guilt-free approach to life's inevitable accidents. A leather-bound tome filled with delicate mechanical drawings of clocks which smelled of regret and yesterday mornings. I'd left it locked in the roll-top desk, whispering and tick-tocking to itself. Look, there are good reasons we don't lend out books like that. Our mistresses used to scare us with stories of mortals run amok, people who used books to steal or kill or break hearts, who performed miracles and founded religions, who hated us afterward and spent a tiresome few centuries burning us at stakes. If I were caught handing out books, I'd be renounced, reviled, stripped of my title. They'd burn my library card in the eternal mauve flames of our sisterhood and write my crimes in ash and blood in the book of perfidy. They'd ban me from every library for eternity. And what's a librarian without her books? What would I be, cut off from the orderly world of words and their readers, from the peaceful Ouroboran cycle of storytelling and story-eating? There were rumors of rogue librarians, madwomen, who chose to live outside the library system in the howling chaos of unwritten words and untold stories. none of us envied them. The last time I'd seen the ponytailed girl, her denim skirt was fastened with a rubber band looped through the buttonhole. She'd smelled of desperation, like someone whose wait and hoping had run dry. 4 days later, her picture was in the paper. The article was blurring and unblurring in my vision. Accidental poisoning, viewing from 2 o'clock to 3:30 at Zimmerman and Holmes. Direct your donations to Maysville Baptist Ministries. Agnes had patted my hand and said, "I know, honey, I know. Sometimes there's nothing you can do." It was a kind lie. I still have the newspaper clipping in my desk drawer as a memorial or reminder or warning. The boy with the red backpack was sweating beneath the reading desk. He smelled of desperation just like she had. Should I call the Child Protective Services hotline? Make awkward small talk until his crummy caseworker collected him? "Hey, kid, I was once a lonely teenager in a backwater shithole, too." Or should I let him run away, even if running away was only hiding in the library overnight? I teetered the way you do when you're about to do something really dumb. The lock thunked into place. I walked across the parking lot, breathing the caramel and frost smell of October, hoping, almost praying, if witches were into that it would be enough. I opened half an hour early, angling to beat Agnes to the phone and delete the "Have you seen this unaccompanied minor?" voicemails before she could hear them. There was an automated message from somebody trying to sell us a security system, 3 calls from community members asking us when we open because apparently it's physically impossible to Google it, and a volunteer calling in sick. There were no messages about the boy. Fucking Ulysses County foster system. He emerged at 9:45 when he could blend in with the growing numbers of other patrons. He looked rumpled and ill-fitting, like a visitor from another planet who hadn't quite figured out human body language. Or like a kid who spent the night in the stacks, listening to furtive missives from 1,000 different worlds and wishing he could disappear into any one of them. I was so busy trying not to cry and ignoring the book now calling to the boy from the roll-top desk that I scanned his card and handed him back his book without realizing what it was. The Runaway Prince. Maysville Public Library notice. You have one overdue item. Please return your item as soon as possible. Shit. The overdue notices go out on the 15th day and item has been checked out. On the 16th day, I pulled up the boy's account and glared at the terse red font. Overdue item. J. Fick, GEO, 1994. Until the screen began to crackle and smoke faintly, and Agnes gave me a "hold it together, woman" look. He hadn't even bothered to renew it. My sense of the runaway prince had grown faint and blurred with distance, as if I were looking at it through an unfocused telescope. But it was still a book from my library and thus still in my domain. All you people who never returned books to your high school libraries or who bought stolen books off Amazon with call numbers taped to their spines, we see you. It reported only the faintest second-hand scent of the boy, futility, resignation, and a tarry, oozing smell like yearning that had died and begun to fossilize. He was alive, but probably not for much longer. I don't just mean physical suicide. Those of us who can see soul stuff know there are lots of ways to die without anybody noticing. Have you ever seen those stupid TV specials where they rescue animals from some third-rate horror show of a circus in Las Vegas, and when they finally open the cages, the lions just sit there, dead-eyed, because they've forgotten what it is to want anything? To desire, to yearn, to be filled with the terrible golden hunger of being alive. But there was nothing I could do except wait and hope. Our volunteers were doing the weekly movie showing in Media Room number 2, so I was stuck reshelving. It wasn't until I was actually in the FDAC-FEN aisle, holding our dog-eared copy of The Count of Monte Cristo in my hand, that I realized Edmond Dantes was absolutely 100% full of shit. If Edmond had taken his own advice, he would have sat in his jail cell waiting and hoping for 40 years while the Count de Morcerf and Villefort and the rest of them stayed rich and happy. The real moral of The Count of Monte Cristo was surely something more like, if you screw someone over, be prepared for a vengeful mastermind to fuck up your life 20 years later. Or maybe it was, if you want justice and goodness to prevail in this world, you have to fight for it tooth and nail. And it will be hard and costly and probably illegal. You will have to break the rules. I pressed my head to the cold metal of the shelf and closed my eyes. If that boy ever comes back into my library, I swear to Cleo and Calliope I will do my most holy duty. I will give him the book he needs most. Aradia, Morgan. A Witch's Guide to Escape, a practical compendium of portal fantasies, written in the year of our sisterhood, 2002, and submitted to the care of the Ulysses County Public Library System. He came back to say goodbye, I think. He slid the runaway prince into the return slot, then drifted through the aisles with his red backpack hanging off one shoulder, fingertips not quite brushing the shelves, eyes on the floor. They hardly seemed sorcerous at all now, merely sad and old and smoke-colored. He was passing through the travel and tourism section when he saw it. A heavy, cloth-bound book jammed right between The Practical Nomad, 910.4 HAS, and By Plane, Train, or Foot, A Guide for the Aspiring Globetrotter, 910.51. It had no call number, but the title was stamped in swirly gold lettering on the spine, A Witch's Guide to Escape. I felt the hollow thudding of his heart, the pain of resurrected hope. He reached toward the book, and the book reached back towards him. Because books need to be read quite as much as we need to read them, and it had been a very long time since this particular book had been out of the roll-top desk in the special collections room. Dark fingers touched the green-dyed cloth, and it was like two sundered halves of some broken thing finally reuniting. Like a lost key finally turning in its lock. Every book in the library rustled in unison, sighing at the sacred wholeness of reader and book. Agnes was in the rows of computers, explaining our 30-minute policy to a new patron. She broke off mid-sentence and looked up toward the 900s, nostrils flared. Then, with an expression halfway between accusation and disbelief, she turned to look at me. I met her eyes, and it isn't easy to meet Agnes's eyes when she's angry, believe me. And she smiled. When they drag me before the mistresses and burn my card and demand to know in tones of mournful recrimination how I could have abandoned the vows of our order, I'll say, "Hey, you abandoned them first, ladies. Somewhere along the line, you forgot our first and purest purpose, to give patrons the books they need most. And, oh, how they will always need." I wondered, with a kind of detached trepidation, how rogue librarians spent their time and whether they had clubs or societies and what it was like to encounter feral stories untamed by narrative and unbound by books. And then I wondered where our books came from in the first place and who wrote them. There was a sudden, imperceptible rushing, as if a wild wind had whipped through the stacks without disturbing a single page. Several people looked up uneasily from their screens. A Witch's Guide to Escape lay abandoned on the carpet, open to a map of some foreign fey country drawn in sepia ink. A red backpack sat beside it.
A formative chunk of my childhood was spent in a very, very small community in southern Washington state. A community where the bus driver was the janitor, was the cook. Roughly 40 children, kindergarten to 8th grade. For 2 years, I was the only student in my year. I lived for the bookmobile. I was one of those kids who loved to book it every year because I could easily score half a dozen personal pizzas without breaking a sweat. I begged the librarian to raise my checkout limits every time because there was no way a mere 5 books could last me the 2 weeks between visits. And when life at home started going downhill, I had books to hide in. Books were more than escapism. They were steady, reliable, enjoyable, and usually acceptable to read at school. I'm kind of surprised there aren't any librarians in my family as far as I know. Teachers, lots of teachers, but no librarians. I could stay up as late as I wanted as a kid, as long as I was reading. Literature and access to it were integral parts of my childhood. For every taunt from a gang of bullies or broken heart, there was escape between pulp pages. Amber, Valdemar, Portals and Ansibles and Shadow. I was a nerdy kid with book-loving relatives. I was lucky. Look, I'm not gonna tell you the pleasant lie we all yearn for, that reading solves every problem. As much as it feels like magic, it's not. Reality still looms large. There's always that blinking, jarring moment when the book is done, and the first thing you see when you look up is the pile of dirty dishes or unfinished homework. What reading can do is broaden our hearts with empathy and compassion alongside broadening minds, with problem solving and intellectual survival skills. I really dislike that phrase, ignorance is bliss, because when people use it, they intend it to mean willfully limiting choices helps eliminate stress or indecision. That's not it at all. Ignorance is a status. It's not having access or capability to increase your knowledge. Very young children are ignorant. It can be a coping mechanism as easily as it can be a tool of oppression. And it can be overcome, one step, one book at a time. Knowledge is power. And to mangle a favorite quote, knowledge equals power, equals energy, equals matter, equals mass, equals space, equals time. Go get interdimensionally lost in a really big library. And join us again as Banned Books Week continues this entire week. We love bringing you the best audio fiction week after week, but we can't do it without your support. Your donations pay our authors, our narrators, our servers, and our staff. Please consider supporting us with a monthly donation through either PayPal or Patreon. You can also review us on iTunes, request us on Spotify, and consider the stories we publish for award consideration. There are lots of ways you can help. Join the discussion on the EA Forum, forum.escapeartists.net, or come visit us on Twitter at Cast of Wonders. Cast of Wonders is a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and is brought to you by the creative team of assistant editors Catherine Inskip and Alexis Goebel. Our associate editors are Tonya Bezpalko, Amy Brennan, Alicia Caporaso, Trace Von Teal, William Heitminer, Andrew K. Ho, Sean Proctor, Ray O, Susie Rodriguez, Carissa Sluss, Emma Smales, and Chris Tang. Our audio producer is Jeremy Carter, our community manager is Danny Daly, and I remain as always your humble editor and host, Marguerite Kenner. Our episodes are released under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. That means you can download or listen to the episode on any device you like for free, but you can't change it or sell it. Our theme music, Appeal to Heavens, is by Alexei Nov and available from Promo DJ or his Facebook page. Thanks for listening.